going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ovens Garage. Today I'm working on my wife's 2003 BMW X5. It's an E53 and it has the M54 3-liter engine in it. And today I'm dealing with a pain in the butt oil filter housing gasket. This guy right there. That guy right there. What has happened is I replaced that not even 3 months ago, and probably within a week or two after replacing it, I noticed that something was leaking still, and I wasn't quite sure, so I decided to pretty much rip like everything in the engine bay apart, because these cars are just so easy to work on. So I decided that I would just order another oil filter housing gasket, and this time I'm not screwing around. I'm going to use that gasket, and I'm also going to put some RTV on there. Yes, I know that's probably not the best thing to do, but I really don't want to take this thing apart again for a third time because it's leaking. So I'm not going to screw around this time. I'm just going to use RTV as well as that gasket. So big thing here, oil filter housing gasket. I'm just trying to get rid of all the stupid leaks on this car because it's getting a little bit annoying and it's wrecking my driveway. Yeah, so I've got everything torn apart. You can watch other videos on how to do that, but I just wanted to make a video showing that if you still have a leak, this is what I'm gonna do, and then I'll get everything put back together, show it running, and then I'll show you that there's no leaks. I've taken out the old gasket and I've gone into the grooves and cleaned as best as I could all the grooves, because that is the sealing surface between this groove and then the flat surface on the block. That's what the O-ring is supposed to seal, but in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my new oil filter housing gasket, I'm going to take a thin coat of RTV, spread it all around this on this gasket, and then when I seat it in there, I'll push it in, make sure it's all snug against here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a thin coat of my RTV and I'm going to come to the block side, which I've already cleaned thoroughly to make sure there's no debris anywhere on here, and I'm going to put a thin coat on all this flat surface around here, so when I mate the two surfaces, I'll snug down the bolts finger tight, let it cure up for an hour, and then I'll torque them to spec. And then it says to allow 24 hours before the RTV is dry before you run the system. Alright, just showing you real quick. I put a thin coat of RTV onto the gasket as well as that mating surface. And then on the block as well, I put a thin coat of RTV just on all those flat surfaces. Really don't need to gob up too much on there. But right now I'll put the oil filter housing put the oil filter housing back on here, line it up, get all bolts in there, and I'll finger tighten all the bolts. And what I'm supposed to do is let it cure up for an hour and then torque it down to spec. Okay, so I've got the bolts finger tight. I'm gonna wait about an hour and then I'm gonna come back and torque those to spec. Just talking real quick about torquing these down. There's 6 bolts, but 4 of those bolts are actually only over the oil filter housing gasket. So what I'm gonna do now that I've snugged these all down and wait for the oil to cure, they get torqued down to 16 foot-pounds, and I'm gonna do a cross pattern above the gasket. So I'm gonna go this one, that one, and then this guy, and then I'm gonna torque those two to 16 foot-pounds and then go back over each of them, make sure they're all at 16 foot-pounds. But these 4 are above the gasket, those 2 are just above the block and are just supporting the housing itself. So these 4, those 2, back over all of them, 16 foot-pounds. All right, I've got the oil filter housing torqued down to spec. Next thing I'm gonna do is put on the power steering pump down there, and then I'm gonna be able to throw the alternator back on and hook everything up and put the belt back on and also put the fan back in. One step at a time. All right, so I've got everything buttoned back up. I put all the intake stuff back on. I let the beauty plates off the valve cover and the top of the engine for now because I'm still waiting on that M56 valve cover to show up. But in the meantime, I'm gonna take this for a test drive, make sure I've got no leaks on the oil filter housing gasket, make sure I've got no leaks in the power steering components that I've replaced. And as well, I want to make sure that everything else is good to go before I do the valve cover swap here. I also want to test and make sure that this fan's working on the coolant sensor that I installed. So we'll take her out for a test rip here, see how she does, see if the fan kicks on, make sure there's no leaks, come back, let it sit in the garage for overnight and see if anything drips down. If there's nothing that drips down, then that'll be mission success in terms of there being no leaks. I'll leave the inspection plate off for now, but just keep in mind that this steel plate on the bottom underneath the engine, you're supposed to have on there before you drive. Now it says to replace the bolts, but I'm just gonna reuse those. So, you know, do as you wish if you replace yours or if you take your inspection plate or metal steel plate off the bottom of the engine. So we'll go for a test drive.